We thought it was just going to be another ordinary field trip. Our teacher, Miss Harrison, had planned a day hike in the nearby Blackwood Forest, a place infamous for its tall, imposing trees and the eerie silence that seemed to swallow any sound. It was supposed to be an educational trip, a chance to learn about nature and get some fresh air. Little did we know it would turn into a nightmare we could never have imagined. The morning was bright and sunny, with a slight chill in the air. Perfect hiking weather, Miss Harrison had said. There were 10 of us in total. Me, Emma, Jack, Lucy, Ben, Sam, Chloe, David, Mia, and of course, Miss Harrison. We were all in high spirits, chatting and laughing as we made our way into the forest. The sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating dancing patterns on the forest floor. About an hour into our hike, we stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin. It was hidden away in a clearing, almost swallowed by the surrounding trees. The wood was rotting and the windows were dark and empty. Miss Harrison told us to stay away, but curiosity got the better of us. Jack and Ben dared each other to go inside, and before we knew it, the whole group was inching closer. As we approached, a strange feeling washed over me. The air seemed colder, and an unsettling silence replaced the usual forest sounds. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just nerves. But when Jack pushed open the creaky door, a foul odor hit us, like something had been dead inside for a long time. Despite the smell, we ventured inside. The cabin was dark, with broken furniture scattered around and walls covered in strange symbols. It felt wrong, like we were intruding on something ancient and malevolent. Miss Harrison finally pulled us out, scolding us for our recklessness, and we continued our hike, though the atmosphere had changed. The fun and excitement had been replaced by an uneasy tension. We walked in silence for a while, the trees around us seeming to close in. The path grew narrower, and the sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense foliage. Then we heard it, a faint whispering, like the wind carrying voices from far away. At first, we thought it was just our imaginations, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be calling our names. Miss Harrison tried to keep us calm, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She urged us to stick together and quickened her pace. But the whispers followed us, growing louder with every step. It felt like the forest itself was alive, watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. And then out of nowhere, David screamed. David's scream cut through the forest, echoing off the trees. We all froze, hearts pounding as we turned to see what had terrified him. He was pointing to a spot just off the path, his face pale with fear. "Did you see that?" he stammered, eyes wide. "What did you see?" Miss Harrison asked, her voice trembling. I don't know," David replied, shaking his head. "It was just there, one moment, and then gone, like a shadow, but it moved." The whispers seemed to intensify, as if mocking our fear. We huddled closer together, trying to make sense of what was happening. Miss Harrison decided it was best to head back to the school bus, and we all agreed, our excitement for the hike completely gone. But when we turned to leave, the path we had been following was no longer there. Panic set in. We couldn't find our way back. The forest seemed to have shifted, trapping us in its labyrinth of trees. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. Miss Harrison took out her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The realization that we were lost hit us hard. "We need to stay calm," Miss Harrison said, though her voice was shaky. "We'll find our way back. Just stick together." We walked in what we hoped was the right direction, but every step seemed to take us deeper into the forest. The trees loomed over us, their branches like skeletal hands reaching out to grab us. The whispers never stopped, and now we could hear footsteps too, faint but unmistakable, as if something was following us. Out of nowhere, a dense fog began to roll in, obscuring our vision. We could barely see a few feet ahead. The air grew colder, and the sense of dread became almost palpable. We clung to each other, moving slowly, afraid of what might be lurking in the mist. And then, without warning, Mia was gone. One moment she was right beside me, and the next she had vanished into the fog. We called out for her, our voices desperate, but there was no answer. Miss Harrison tried to keep us moving, insisting that we couldn't stop now, but we were all on edge, jumping at every sound. We stumbled upon another clearing, this one with an old, decrepit well in the center. The whispers seemed to be coming from it, louder and more insistent. Miss Harrison warned us to stay away, but curiosity got the better of us again. Jack approached the well, peering inside. "What are you doing?" Miss Harrison hissed, but Jack ignored her. He leaned in closer, his face inches from the dark opening. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the well, grabbing his arm. He screamed, trying to pull away, but the grip was too strong. We all rushed to help, but something was pulling him in, something we couldn't see. "Let go," Miss Harrison shouted, but it was too late. With one final blood-curdling scream, Jack was dragged into the well, disappearing into the darkness. We stood there, horrified and helpless, as the whispers grew louder, almost deafening. Whatever was in the forest, it wasn't going to let us leave. We were being hunted. After Jack vanished into the well, we were paralyzed with fear. Miss Harrison tried to rally us, urging us to keep moving, but her voice lacked conviction. The forest seemed to close in on us, the trees like sentinels watching our every move. The fog was thicker now, and the whispers were louder than ever, a constant murmur that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. We moved as a group, huddled together, our breaths quick and shallow. Every sound made us jump, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, our own footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. We knew we had to keep going, but it felt like we were walking in circles, the forest playing tricks on us. Then we heard it, a low, guttural growl that sent chills down our spines. It was close, too close. We picked up our pace, almost running now, but the growl followed us, growing louder and more menacing. Whatever was hunting us was getting closer. Ben, who had been leading the group, suddenly stopped. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. We all listened, straining to hear over the whispers in our pounding hearts. There it was again, a soft rustling in the underbrush, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing. Something was out there, stalking us. "We need to hide," Lucy said, her voice trembling. "We can't outrun it." Miss Harrison nodded, her face pale. "This way," she whispered, leading us off the path and deeper into the forest. We found a cluster of large boulders and crouched behind them, trying to stay as silent as possible. The growling grew louder and we could see shadows moving through the fog. My heart was racing and I could feel the cold sweat on my skin. I held my breath, praying that whatever it was wouldn't find us. Suddenly, Chloe let out a small gasp. I turned to see her eyes wide with terror, her hand covering her mouth. I followed her gaze and saw it, a pair of glowing eyes peering at us from the darkness. They were too high off the ground to belong to any animal we knew, and they were getting closer. The creature emerged from the fog, its form barely visible but terrifying nonetheless. It was tall, impossibly tall, with long, twisted limbs and a face that seemed to be a grotesque mask of shadows. It moved with an unnatural grace, its eyes fixed on us. We were frozen, unable to move or scream. The creature sniffed the air, its growls reverberating through the forest. It was searching for us, and it was only a matter of time before it found us. Miss Harrison made a sudden decision. "Run," she whispered urgently. "Run now." We bolted from our hiding spot, scattering in different directions. I could hear the creature's roar behind us, and the ground seemed to shake with its fury. I didn't dare look back. My only thought was to keep moving, to get away. I ran until my legs burned and my lungs felt like they were on fire. The forest blurred around me, the fog swallowing everything. I could hear the others shouting, their voices fading into the distance. Finally, I stumbled into another clearing and collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. I was alone, the whisper still echoing in my ears. I didn't know where the others were or if they had made it. The creature's growls were still faintly audible, but they seemed farther away now. I allowed myself a moment of relief, but deep down I knew this wasn't over. The forest wasn't going to let us go that easily. I lay on the cold ground, my breath coming in ragged gasps, trying to gather my thoughts. The forest seemed quieter now, but the whispers still lingered, a constant reminder that we weren't alone. I had no idea where the others were or if they were even alive. All I knew was that I had to keep moving. Summoning all my strength, I got to my feet and started walking, hoping to find a familiar landmark or some sign of the path we had come from. The fog was still thick, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Every step felt like it could lead me deeper into the unknown. After what felt like hours, I heard a faint sound. Water. My heart leapt with a mix of hope and fear. Water meant a stream or a river which could lead me out of the forest, but it also meant another potential trap, another place where the creature could be waiting. Cautiously, I followed the sound. weaving through the trees until I came upon a small stream. The water was dark and sluggish, but it was moving, and that was enough for me. I knelt down to take a drink, the cold water soothing my dry throat. As I drank, I heard a rustling behind me. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. Slowly, I turned around, expecting to see the creature. Instead, I saw Emma, her face streaked with tears and dirt. "Emma!" I whispered, rushing to her. She looked as scared as I felt, but seeing her alive gave me a glimmer of hope. "We have to find the others," she said, her voice trembling. "We can't leave them." I nodded, though the thought of going back into the forest terrified me. But Emma was right. We couldn't abandon our friends, not without trying to save them. We decided to follow the stream, hoping it would lead us to the others or at least out of the forest. We moved as quietly as we could, listening for any signs of danger. The whispers seemed to grow fainter, but we knew better than to trust the silence. After a while, we heard voices, familiar voices. We hurried toward the sound, our hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. We found Lucy and Ben huddled together by the stream, their faces pale and eyes wide with terror. "Thank God," Lucy whispered when she saw us. "We thought we were the only ones left." "We have to keep moving," Ben said urgently. "That thing is still out there." We agreed and continued along the stream, hoping it would lead us to safety. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the trees looming over us like dark sentinels. The fog was beginning to lift, but the sense of dread remained. As we walked, we heard something new, a distant, rhythmic thumping like drums. It was coming from deeper in the forest, and it sent chills down my spine. Whatever it was, it didn't sound natural. We pressed on, trying to ignore the unsettling sounds. Suddenly, Emma stopped, her eyes wide with fear. "Look," she whispered, pointing ahead. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, was a figure. It was tall and thin, its movements jerky and unnatural. It didn't seem to have noticed us yet, but it was moving in our direction. We ducked behind a fallen log, praying it wouldn't see us. The figure moved closer, and I could see it more clearly now. It wasn't the creature that had chased us before, but something else, something equally terrifying. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones, and its eyes were hollow, empty sockets. We held our breath, waiting for it to pass. But just as it was about to move away, it stopped and turned its head, as if it had sensed our presence. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest. We couldn't run, couldn't hide. All we could do was hope it would leave us alone. It took a step closer, and I felt Emma's hand tighten on my arm. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the worst. I kept my eyes shut, every muscle tensed, waiting for the inevitable. The figure's footsteps were slow and deliberate, crunching the forest floor with each step. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the footsteps stopped. I dared to open my eyes only to find the figure standing mere feet away, its empty socket staring directly at us. Time seemed to stretch out, each second an eternity. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel Emma trembling beside me. The figure tilted its head, as if contemplating our fate, and then without warning, it turned and continued its eerie, jerky walk deeper into the forest. We stayed still for what felt like ages, afraid to move or make a sound. Finally, when we were sure it was gone, we let out a collective sigh of relief. But our sense of safety was fleeting. We knew there were more dangers lurking in the forest, and we had to keep moving. "We need to find Miss Harrison," Lucy whispered, her voice shaking. "She'll know what to do." We all agreed, and with a newfound sense of urgency, we resumed our journey along the stream. The rhythmic thumping we had heard earlier was getting louder, a steady, ominous beat that seemed to resonate through the trees. It was as if the forest itself had a heartbeat, a pulse that quickened as we ventured further. After what felt like hours, we stumbled upon another clearing. In the center was an ancient-looking stone altar, covered in moss and strange, unreadable carvings. Surrounding it were tall wooden totems adorned with animal skulls and feathers. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying. "What is this place?" Ben whispered, his eyes wide with awe and fear. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely audible. "But we should keep moving." As we stepped into the clearing, the whispers returned, louder and more frantic than before. The air grew colder, and I could feel a malevolent presence watching us. We tried to skirt around the altar, but something drew us closer, an unseen force compelling us to approach. When we reached the altar, I noticed something strange. There were objects placed around it, trinkets, pieces of clothing, and what looked like personal belongings. Among them, I spotted something that made my blood run cold. Mia's bracelet. She had been wearing it earlier, and now it lay on the altar, as if offered up to whatever dark force resided here. "We have to get out of here," I said, my voice trembling. "Now." But before we could move, the ground beneath us began to shake. The rhythmic thumping had reached a fever pitch, and the whispers were deafening. The totems seemed to come alive, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. We huddled together, too scared to run, as the forest around us seemed to warp and twist. Out of the shadows a figure emerged, Ms. Harrison. But something was wrong. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale and stretched tight, just like the figure we had seen earlier. She moved with the same jerky, unnatural motions, and her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. "Welcome," she said, her voice a chilling echo. "You've come so far, but the forest is not done with you yet." We stared in horror, unable to comprehend what we were seeing. Miss Harrison, or whatever this thing was, raised a hand, and the whisper stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. The air grew thick, and it felt like the forest was closing in on us. "You cannot escape," she continued, her voice growing darker. "You belong to the forest now." We didn't wait to hear more. In a desperate burst of adrenaline, we turned and ran, not caring where we were going, just trying to get away from the nightmare that had consumed our teacher. The forest blurred around us, and the rhythmic thumping seemed to follow, a relentless reminder that we were far from safe. We ran until our legs gave out, collapsing in a heap among the twisted roots of an ancient tree. Our breaths came in ragged gasps, and the oppressive silence of the forest pressed down on us. The whispers had faded, but the memory of Miss Harrison's twisted smile haunted us. We had no idea how to escape this living nightmare. "What are we going to do?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "We keep moving," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "There has to be a way out. We just have to find it." We got to our feet, leaning on each other for support. The forest seemed even more menacing now, the trees looming like dark sentinels. Every shadow felt like it was watching us, waiting for a moment of weakness. We walked in silence, too scared to speak. The forest had become a maze, every direction looking the same. As we moved deeper, we came across a series of strange, twisted sculptures made of branches and bones. They were arranged in intricate patterns, each one more disturbing than the last. It was as if the forest itself was trying to drive us mad. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure moving through the trees. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized Sam, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. He stumbled toward us, collapsing at our feet. "Sam!" Ben cried, rushing to his side. "What happened? Where have you been?" Sam looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and fear. "I got separated from the group," he said, his voice shaking. "I've been wandering for hours, trying to find my way back. There's something out there, something worse than the creature." We helped Sam to his feet, our fear deepening. If there was something worse out there, we had to find a way to protect ourselves. But how do you fight the unknown? As we continued walking, Sam told us about his encounter with the forest's horrors. He spoke of ghostly figures that seemed to materialize out of the mist, whispering dark secrets and making impossible demands. He had seen shadows move on their own and heard voices calling his name from the depths of the woods. "I thought I was going crazy," he admitted. "But seeing you all, I know it's real. We have to stick together. It's the only way we'll survive." His words gave us a renewed sense of determination. We pressed on, keeping a close eye on our surroundings. The rhythmic thumping had returned, a constant reminder that the forest was alive and hunting us. The trees seemed to close in, the path growing narrower and more treacherous. Then we came across something that stopped us in our tracks, a large circular clearing, the ground scorched and barren. In the center stood a towering tree, its bark blackened and twisted. Hanging from its branches were dozens of trinkets, each one glinting in the dim light. Among them I saw more familiar items: Lucy's hair ribbon, Ben's watch, Chloe's necklace. "This is where they've taken them," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What do we do?" Lucy asked, her voice trembling. "We have to destroy it," Ben said, his eyes burning with a fierce determination. Whatever is controlling the forest, it's connected to this tree. If we can destroy it, maybe we can break the curse. We gathered around the tree, unsure of how to proceed. The air was thick with malevolence, and the ground beneath our feet seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched the tree's bark. It was cold and unyielding, but as soon as I made contact, a wave of visions flooded my mind. I saw the forest as it once was, a place of beauty and light. But something had happened, something dark and terrible. A ritual gone wrong, a curse unleashed. The forest had become a prison, a living nightmare that fed on fear and despair. "We have to burn it," I said, pulling my hand away. "Fire is the only way to cleanse this place." Sam produced a lighter from his pocket, his hands shaking as he flicked it on. We gathered dry leaves and branches, piling them at the base of the tree. As the flames began to lick at the twisted bark, the forest seemed to shudder, the rhythmic thumping growing louder, more frantic. The fire spread quickly, the tree engulfed in a blaze of orange and red. The whispers turned into screams, the forest writhing in agony. We stepped back, watching as the flames consumed the cursed tree, hoping against hope that this would end the nightmare. As the tree burned, the forest seemed to react violently. The ground shook, and the trees around us groaned and swayed as if in pain. The whispers turned into a cacophony of screams, a chorus of agony and rage. The air grew thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning wood. "We need to get out of here," Ben shouted, his voice barely audible over the din. We turned and ran, the forest around us a chaotic blur. The ground cracked and shifted beneath our feet, making every step treacherous. Branches reached out like skeletal hands, trying to trip us, to pull us back into the nightmare. The fire spread quickly, consuming everything in its path, and we could feel the heat at our backs as we ran. The rhythmic thumping had intensified, now a deafening roar that seemed to reverberate through our very bones. It felt as if the forest itself was collapsing, the curse unraveling in a violent, desperate attempt to keep us trapped. We stumbled into another clearing, this one larger and bathed in a strange, eerie light. In the center was a large stone archway, covered in the same strange symbols we had seen in the cabin and on the totems. It pulsed with a faint, otherworldly glow, as if it was a portal to another realm. "This way," Sam yelled, pointing to the archway. "It's our only chance." We sprinted toward the archway, the ground beneath us shaking with each step. As we got closer, I could feel a strange energy emanating from it, a mix of hope and terror. The forest behind us was a wall of flames and shadows, the creatures' roars echoing through the trees. We reached the archway and hesitated for a split second, unsure of what lay beyond. But with the forest collapsing around us, we had no choice. One by one, we stepped through the archway, the world blurring and twisting around us. I felt a strange sensation as if I was being pulled apart and put back together at the same time. The screams of the forest faded, replaced by a deafening silence. When the world came back into focus, we found ourselves standing in a different part of the forest. The air was cooler, and the trees here were not twisted and dark, but tall and green, bathed in the soft light of dawn. We had made it. We were out. We collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, relief flooding through us. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to believe that we might actually survive this. "We did it," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We're free." But our relief was short-lived. As we looked around, we realized that not all of us had made it through the archway. Lucy and Chloe were gone, and we had no idea where they might be or if they were even still alive. The forest still held its secrets, and the loss of our friends weighed heavily on us. "We have to go back for them," Ben said, his voice filled with determination. "No," Sam replied, shaking his head. "We can't. The forest is too dangerous. We barely made it out ourselves." "But we can't just leave them," I said, my heart aching at the thought of abandoning our friends. "We don't have a choice," Emma said softly. "We need to find help, real help. Then we can come back and save them." We reluctantly agreed and began walking, hoping to find a way out of the forest completely. As we moved, the rhythmic thumping faded into the distance, and the whispers grew silent. The forest seemed almost peaceful, but we knew better than to trust it. We had seen its true face, and we would never forget the horrors it held. We walked for what felt like hours, the sun rising higher in the sky. Finally, we stumbled upon a dirt road, a sign of civilization. We followed it, our spirits lifting with each step. We didn't know what lay ahead, but we were determined to survive, to tell our story, and to save our friends. The nightmare was far from over, but for now, we had escaped. And as we walked, we made a silent vow to each other. We would return, and we would not rest until the forest's curse was broken for good. We walked along the dirt road, our feet heavy with exhaustion, but our spirits lifted by the promise of safety. The sun was now fully risen, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. The horrors of the forest seemed distant, but the weight of our lost friends hung heavily over us. After what felt like an eternity, we saw a small town in the distance. Relief washed over us as we quickened our pace, the prospect of finding help driving us forward. The town was quiet, its streets empty in the early morning light. We headed straight for the police station, desperate to find someone who could help us. We burst through the doors, startling the officer at the front desk. "Please, you have to help us," I exclaimed, my voice hoarse from fear and exhaustion. The officer, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, looked at us with concern. "Calm down, kids. Tell me what happened." We quickly recounted our ordeal, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. The officer listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. When we finished, he stood up and called for backup. "We're going to send a search party into the forest," he said, his voice firm. "We'll find your friends." We nodded, grateful for his help but still anxious. The memory of the forest's horrors was too fresh, and we couldn't shake the feeling that our friends were still in grave danger. As we waited for the search party to assemble, we were given blankets and hot drinks. The warmth was a stark contrast to the cold fear that still lingered in our hearts. We huddled together, drawing strength from each other, determined not to let the forest's darkness consume us. Hours passed, and finally, the search party set out. We wanted to go with them, but the officers insisted we stay behind, too exhausted and traumatized to be of any help. So we watched as they disappeared into the trees, hoping they would return with our friends. The waiting was agonizing. Every minute felt like an hour, and every sound made us jump. We couldn't shake the feeling that the forest's curse was far from broken, that it was still out there, waiting to claim more victims. As the sun began to set, the search party returned. They looked grim, and our hearts sank. The officer who had first helped us approached, his face etched with sorrow. "We searched the forest," he said quietly. "We found no trace of your friends, but we did find something else." He handed us a small worn journal, its pages filled with cramped, hurried writing. "We found this near the stone archway you described. It seems to belong to someone who had encountered the forest's curse before." We took the journal, our hands trembling. As we flipped through the pages, a chilling story unfolded. The journal belonged to a man named Robert, who had ventured into the forest years ago. He had documented his descent into madness, describing the same horrors we had faced: whispers, shadows, and the relentless thumping. But Robert had also written about a possible way to break the curse. According to his journal, the forest was bound to a dark spirit, a guardian of the cursed land. To break the curse, one had to find the spirit's lair, hidden deep within the forest, and perform a ritual to sever its connection to the land. "Do you think it could work?" Ben asked, his voice filled with a mix of hope and fear. "I don't know," I replied, my mind racing. "But it might be our only chance to save our friends and end this nightmare once and for all." We spent the night in the town, our minds restless with the knowledge we had gained. We knew what we had to do. We would return to the forest, find the spirit's lair, and perform the ritual. It was a terrifying prospect, but we had no other choice. Our friends' lives depended on it. As dawn broke, we prepared to set out once more, armed with the knowledge from Robert's journal and the determination to end the forest's curse. We knew the risks, but we were ready to face them. Together, we would confront the darkness and reclaim our friends from the clutches of the forest. As the first light of dawn filtered through the town, we gathered our courage and prepared to head back into the forest. The fear and trauma of our previous ordeal still lingered, but the need to save our friends and end the curse drove us forward. The officer who had helped us stood by, a look of concern on his face. "Are you sure you want to go back in there?" he asked. It's dangerous, and we don't know what else might be waiting. We don't have a choice, I replied, clutching Robert's journal tightly. Our friends are still out there, and we have to break the curse. He nodded, respecting our determination, and handed us a flashlight and a map of the area. Be careful, he said, and if you find yourselves in trouble, get out of there. Don't risk your lives. With a final nod, we set off, retracing our steps back to the forest. The path seemed different in the morning light, but the sense of dread was still palpable. The rhythmic thumping was gone, replaced by an eerie silence that felt even more unsettling. As we approached the edge of the forest, we paused, taking a deep breath. We stick together, Ben said, his voice firm. No one goes off alone. We all agreed and stepped into the shadows once more. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees looming like silent guardians. The light from our flashlights cast long, flickering shadows that danced across the ground. We followed the map, using the landmarks Robert had described in his journal. The first was a twisted tree, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. We found it easily enough, and from there we followed a narrow, winding path deeper into the forest. As we walked, we kept our senses alert for any signs of danger. The forest seemed to be watching us, its malevolent presence palpable. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig set our nerves on edge. After what felt like hours, we reached the second landmark, a small, overgrown clearing with a circle of stones in the center. According to the journal, this was a place of power, where the barrier between our world and the spirit's realm was thin. It was here that we would begin the ritual. We gathered in the clearing, the air heavy with anticipation. I opened the journal to the page detailing the ritual and read aloud, my voice shaking slightly. To break the curse, you must summon the spirit and sever its connection to the land. Draw a circle of salt and place offerings within, trinkets of the lost, tokens of the cursed. Speak the words of banishment and light the candles, letting their flames guide the spirit away. We worked quickly, drawing a circle of salt around the stones and placing the trinkets we had found. The bracelet, the hair ribbon, the watch within it. We lit the candles, their flames flickering in the still air. I took a deep breath and began to recite the words from the journal. Spirit of the forest, guardian of the cursed land, we call upon you. Release your hold, sever your ties, and free the souls you have claimed. The air grew colder, and the ground beneath us seemed to tremble. A faint, ghostly light began to emanate from the stones, and the shadows around us grew darker, more menacing. Suddenly, the rhythmic thumping returned, louder and more intense than ever. The forest seemed to come alive, the trees swaying and groaning as if in pain. The light from the stones grew brighter, and a figure began to materialize within the circle. It was the spirit, tall, gaunt, and terrifying, its hollow eyes fixed on us. Its presence was overwhelming, a force of pure malevolence that sent chills down my spine. We must finish the ritual, Emma cried, her voice barely audible over the roar of the forest. I continued reciting the words, my voice shaking but determined. By the power of light, by the strength of will, we banish you. Leave this place, return to the shadows, and free the cursed souls. The spirit let out a deafening scream, a sound that seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality. The candle's flames flared brightly, and the ground shook violently. The spirit's form began to waver, its hold on the forest weakening. With a final desperate cry, the spirit vanished, the light from the stones fading into darkness. The forest grew still, the oppressive presence lifting. We stood in silence, our hearts pounding, as the reality of what we had done sank in. We did it, Ben whispered, his voice filled with awe and relief. We broke the curse. But as the forest fell silent, we knew our journey wasn't over. We still had to find our friends and bring them back. The forest had changed, and we hoped that with the spirit gone, we could navigate its shadows and find our way to them. With renewed determination, we gathered our belongings and set off once more, ready to face whatever the forest had in store. The forest seemed quieter now, the oppressive darkness replaced by a cautious stillness. The rhythmic thumping was gone, but we remained on edge, wary of what might still lurk in the shadows. Our determination to find our friends and ensure the curse was truly broken drove us forward. We followed the path that seemed clearer now, the trees less twisted and the air less heavy. The forest still held an eerie quality, but it felt like it was slowly returning to its natural state. As we walked, we called out for Lucy and Chloe, our voices echoing through the trees. "Lucy, Chloe, can you hear us?" Ben shouted, his voice strained with worry. For a long time, there was no response. Just when we were about to lose hope, a faint, familiar voice reached our ears. "Over here." We hurried toward the sound, our hearts racing. The voice grew louder, more distinct, until we found ourselves in a small clearing. There, sitting against a tree, were Lucy and Chloe. They looked exhausted, but unharmed, their faces lighting up with relief as they saw us. "You found us," Lucy said, tears streaming down her face. "We thought we were never getting out of here." "We're so glad you're okay," Emma said, rushing to hug them. "We thought we lost you." Chloe nodded, her eyes wide with lingering fear. "We got separated during the chaos. We tried to find our way back, but the forest kept changing." "We broke the curse," I said, my voice filled with hope. "The spirit is gone. We can find our way out now." With everyone reunited, our spirits lifted. We helped Lucy and Chloe to their feet, and together we set off to find the edge of the forest. The path seemed easier to follow, as if the forest itself was guiding us toward safety. As we walked, we recounted our experiences, sharing the horrors we had faced and the moments of hope that had kept us going. It was clear that the forest had tried to break us, but our bond and determination had seen us through. After what felt like hours, we finally saw the edge of the forest. The sight of open fields and the distant outline of the town filled us with a sense of freedom and relief. We quickened our pace, eager to leave the forest behind. As we stepped out of the shadows and into the sunlight, we felt a weight lift from our shoulders. The nightmare was over. We had survived. The townspeople welcomed us back, their faces filled with concern and relief. The officer who had helped us earlier rushed to meet us, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You made it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "I didn't think you'd come back." "We had to," I replied, my voice steady. "Our friends needed us." The townspeople took us in, providing food, warmth, and comfort. As we sat together, wrapped in blankets and sipping hot drinks, we felt the reality of our ordeal settle in. We had faced the darkness and come out the other side, but the memory of the forest's horrors would stay with us forever. "We need to tell our story," Ben said, his voice filled with determination. "People need to know what happened. They need to know about the curse." "We will," I agreed, "but for now, let's just rest. We've been through enough." As night fell, we found ourselves in a safe, warm place, surrounded by people who cared. The forest was behind us, but its echoes lingered in our minds. We had survived, and we had each other. That was what mattered. But even as we drifted off to sleep, the shadows of the forest remained, a reminder of the darkness we had faced and the strength we had found within ourselves to overcome it. The night was quiet, but sleep came fitfully. The memory of the forest haunted my dreams, shadows darting between trees, the sound of whispers lingering just out of reach. Each time I thought I had escaped, the darkness would close in, reminding me of the horrors we had faced. I woke suddenly, the silence around me thick and heavy. The others were still asleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb anyone, and ventured outside into the cool night air. The town was peaceful, the stars twinkling overhead. I wandered a bit, drawn to the edge of the forest as if the trees were calling me back. I could see the outline of the trees against the night sky, their forms stark and foreboding. As I approached the tree line, I paused. What if the curse hadn't been completely broken? What if the spirit had left a fragment of itself behind, waiting to reclaim what it had lost? I could feel the tension building, and I hesitated. Just then, I heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible, carried by the night breeze. "Come back. Come back." My heart raced. Was it my imagination, or was the forest really trying to lure me back? I took a step forward, drawn by the whisper, but then I remembered Robert's journal and the warnings within. The spirit had fed on fear and despair, and we couldn't let it take hold of us again. Suddenly, a shape moved among the trees, and I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I peered into the shadows. It was just a deer, its eyes reflecting the starlight, but the sight sent my heart racing. I stepped back, the pull of the forest becoming a desperate need to escape. Just then, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Ben, his face drawn with concern. "What are you doing out here?" he asked softly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I thought I heard something," I admitted, glancing back at the forest. It felt like it was calling me. Ben frowned, stepping closer. We need to be careful. The forest is still a dangerous place, even if the spirit is gone. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. Together, we walked back toward the warmth of the inn, the whispers of the forest fading into the night. As we settled back in, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't finished yet. In the days that followed, we began to share our story with the townspeople. The reactions were a mix of disbelief and fascination. Some were eager to believe, while others dismissed our tale as a fabrication, a product of youthful imagination. But we knew the truth, and we were determined to warn others about the dangers lurking in the forest. One afternoon, as we gathered in the town square, an elderly woman approached us. Her eyes were wise and knowing, and she carried a weathered satchel. "I've heard your story," she said softly. "You faced the shadows of the forest and lived to tell the tale. But you must understand, the forest does not easily release its hold." "What do you mean?" I asked, curiosity piqued. "There are ancient forces at play," she explained. "The spirit may be gone, but remnants of its power linger. It is wise to tread carefully. Many who enter the woods may still hear its whispers, feel its pull." She reached into her satchel and produced a small, intricately carved talisman. "Take this. It may help protect you from the darkness, but remember, the forest has a way of testing those who dare to confront it." We accepted her gift, gratitude washing over us. That night, as we prepared to rest again, I placed the talisman under my pillow. It felt like a shield against the nightmares that threatened to return. But as I closed my eyes, I could still hear the faintest echo of whispers, a reminder that while we had escaped, the shadows of the forest were never too far behind. The days turned into weeks, and life in the town began to feel normal again. We shared our story at local gatherings, educating others about the forest's dangers. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the whispers were always lingering just beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to call me back. One evening, as we gathered at a bonfire with some townsfolk, the subject of the forest came up once more. I felt a chill run down my spine as I recalled the dark spirit, the twisting trees, and the screams that echoed in the night. "Do you think it's really over?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if the spirit's power is still there?" "We broke the curse," Ben insisted, trying to sound reassuring. "We saw it vanish. It has to be gone." But the unease remained, and that night, as I lay in bed, I dreamt of the forest again. The shadows moved like smoke, swirling around me as the whispers beckoned. "Come back. Come back." The call was stronger now, more insistent, as if the forest itself was trying to reach me. I woke with a start, drenched in sweat. The talisman still lay under my pillow, a small comfort in the darkness. I glanced out the window, the trees standing tall and still against the moonlit sky, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was stirring within the forest, something waiting for the right moment. The following day, I gathered the group. "I think we need to go back," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "There may be something we missed. We need to be sure the forest is truly free." "You want to go back?" Lucy exclaimed, her eyes wide. "After everything we've been through?" "It's the only way we can be sure," I replied. "If there's even a chance that the spirit's influence remains, we have to face it again." After a long discussion, the group reluctantly agreed. We decided to head back the following morning, equipped with the talisman and armed with the knowledge we had gained. The prospect of returning to the forest was daunting, but we knew we had to confront the darkness once more. As we approached the forest the next day, the air felt charged, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist. We entered cautiously, the trees closing in around us. The whispers were faint but still present, just enough to send shivers down our spines. Following the map and Robert's journal, we made our way to the clearing where we had performed the ritual. The circle of stones still stood, but the air felt different, charged with energy, as if the remnants of the spirit were still lurking. We gathered in the clearing, the talisman clutched tightly in my hand. "If there's anything left of the spirit, we need to confront it," I said, determination flooding through me. "We can't allow it to regain power." As we began to set up the circle again, the forest around us grew eerily quiet. The only sound was the rustling of leaves, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. We lit the candles and placed them in a circle, the flames flickering in the stillness. With the talisman in the center, I recited the words from Robert's journal once more, my voice strong and unwavering. Spirit of the forest, guardian of the cursed land, we call upon you. Show yourself, and let us end this once and for all. The ground trembled slightly and shadows danced at the edges of the clearing. Then, from the depths of the forest, a chilling figure emerged, a remnant of the spirit, twisted and shadowy, its eyes burning with a dark light. You dare return? It hissed, its voice a cacophony of whispers. You cannot escape my grasp. With the talisman glowing brightly, I stood my ground. We are not afraid. We faced you before, and we will face you again. Your hold over this forest ends now. As I spoke, the talisman pulsed with energy, illuminating the clearing. The spirit writhed, its form flickering between solid and ethereal. The flames of the candles grew higher, and the air buzzed with power. Leave this place, I commanded, my voice echoing through the clearing. Your darkness has no place here. With a final, ear-splitting scream, the spirit recoiled, the shadows swirling violently before being drawn toward the talisman. The clearing exploded with light as the spirit was pulled back, its hold on the forest severed once and for all. As the light faded, we stood together in silence, our hearts pounding with the weight of what had just transpired. The forest felt different now, freer, lighter, as if a dark weight had been lifted. We left the clearing, the whispers silenced, the shadows retreating into the depths of the trees. We had faced the darkness again and emerged victorious. The forest was free, and we had reclaimed our lives. As we walked back toward the town, I glanced back at the forest, a sense of peace washing over me. We would always carry the memories of our journey, but now they were no longer shadows of fear, but echoes of strength and resilience. As we emerged from the forest, the sunlight felt warmer, the air clearer. It was as if the trees themselves breathed a sigh of relief, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The talisman, now dimmed but still clutched in my hand, felt like a badge of honor, a reminder of the battles we had fought. When we reached the town, word of our return had already spread. The townspeople gathered, their faces filled with curiosity and concern. They had seen the tension in our eyes and the resolve in our steps. We recounted the events of our return, the confrontation with the lingering spirit, and how we had finally severed its ties to the forest. The elderly woman who had given us the talisman approached again, a knowing smile on her face. You faced your fears and conquered them, she said softly. The forest is free now, and its whispers will fade with time. As we settled back into the rhythms of town life, I felt a shift within myself as well. The fear that had haunted me since our first encounter with the forest began to diminish. I spent time with my friends, sharing laughter and stories, letting the joy of friendship fill the spaces left by dread. But in the quiet moments, I would sometimes catch myself staring at the forest, wondering about the remnants of the past. I thought about Robert and his journal, and how our paths had intertwined across time. There were stories hidden in those trees, and while we had triumphed, I knew the forest held many more tales waiting to be told. One evening, as we gathered around a bonfire again, I felt the urge to share our story more widely. We should write it down, I suggested. Document everything, the fear, the courage, the victory. It could help others who might face similar darkness. The group agreed, and we decided to compile our experiences into a single narrative, detailing not just the horrors we had encountered, but also the lessons we had learned. We hoped it would serve as a guide for anyone who found themselves drawn to the forest's edge. As we worked together, memories flooded back. Our laughter, our tears, the moments of sheer terror, and the triumph of standing together against the darkness. Each page we filled felt like a cathartic release, a way to honor the friends we had lost and the bonds we had forged. One night, as I sat alone with my thoughts, I glanced at the talisman resting on my desk. It shimmered softly in the moonlight, a reminder that while the forest's shadows had been vanquished, the light we carried within ourselves was far stronger. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers of the forest faded, replaced by the laughter of friends and the warmth of community. We knew that darkness could return in various forms, but we also understood that together, we could face anything that came our way. Finally, after weeks of hard work, we completed our narrative. We decided to share it online, reaching out to others who might benefit from our experiences. As we clicked publish, A sense of accomplishment washed over us. Our story was out there, a testament to the strength of friendship, courage, and the power of confronting one's fears. In the months that followed, our story gained traction, resonating with people far and wide. Others began to share their own experiences with darkness, creating a tapestry of shared struggles and triumphs. The forest, once a source of fear, became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the depths of despair, hope could shine through. And as the years went by, the whispers of the forest grew quiet, transformed into echoes of the past, reminding us that while darkness may always exist, the light we carry can guide us through even the deepest shadows. Months turned into years, and the story of our encounter with the forest took on a life of its own. It was shared, discussed, and adapted into art, paintings, songs, and even a local play. The once feared forest became a symbol of resilience, a place where darkness was confronted and overcome. The town flourished in newfound unity, with festivals celebrating bravery and friendship. We often returned to the forest not as a place of dread but as a reminder of our journey. It was in those woods that we had discovered our strength and the importance of standing together. Yet a part of me still felt the lingering presence of the forest. It whispered in the back of my mind, a reminder of the stories it held and the lessons yet to be learned. I often wandered its edges, always respectful, always cautious. One autumn evening, as the leaves turned to fiery hues, I decided to venture deeper into the forest. I wanted to see the clearing where we had performed the ritual one last time. The air was crisp, and the sunlight filtered through the trees, painting everything in warm golds and reds. As I approached the clearing, I noticed something unexpected. A small gathering of flowers had sprouted where the circle of stones once stood. They bloomed brightly, as if celebrating the spirit's departure and the healing of the land. I knelt down, touched by their beauty, and felt a sense of closure wash over me. Just then, I heard a rustle behind me. Turning, I found Ben and Emma walking toward me, smiles on their faces. "We figured you'd come back here," Emma said, her eyes sparkling with nostalgia. "We couldn't let you have all the fun." We stood together, reflecting on our journey. "Can you believe how far we've come?" Ben mused. "From terrified kids lost in the forest to this." I nodded, grateful for their presence. We faced the darkness and learned so much, and we did it together. As we stood in the clearing, I felt a warmth enveloping us, a gentle reminder that while shadows exist, the light of friendship and shared experience can shine even brighter. The forest felt alive with the stories we had shared, a testament to resilience, healing, and hope. That evening, we returned to the town, hearts full and spirits lifted. The legacy of our experience was alive, woven into the very fabric of the community. As we shared our story, I realized that confronting the darkness had brought us closer together and had transformed fear into strength. In the years to come, I would often think back to that moment in the forest, the flowers blooming where shadows once danced, a symbol of hope and renewal. We had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, and now we carried that light with us wherever we went. And while the forest remained a place of mystery, it was no longer a source of fear. It was a reminder that together, we could face anything that came our way, turning darkness into a powerful testament of resilience and light. As the years passed, our bond grew deeper, forged in the crucible of shared trials. Each autumn, we returned to the forest, not just to remember but to celebrate our journey, the laughter, the tears, and the strength that had seen us through. One crisp evening, we gathered around a fire in the town square, surrounded by friends and neighbors. The air was filled with the scent of burning wood and the sound of laughter. As the flames danced, I looked around at the familiar faces, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey we had taken together. With the town's spirit thriving, we had turned our experiences into a community project, creating a nature trail that showcased the beauty of the forest while educating visitors about its history. Signposts dotted the path, recounting our tale and reminding everyone that darkness can be faced and overcome. That night, I decided to share the final chapter of our story. "We've all faced our fears," I began, my voice steady. "But the true magic lies in the friendships we've forged and the resilience we've discovered within ourselves." As I spoke, I could see the faces of my friends light up with memories. Emma smiled, recalling the first night we had gathered around the fire after escaping the forest, while Ben chuckled at our shared fears and the ridiculousness of our early attempts to navigate the woods. We may have been scared then, but we grew stronger together, I continued. And now this place is a symbol of our journey, a reminder that while shadows may linger, the light of hope and friendship will always guide us through. The crowd erupted in applause, a chorus of agreement and unity. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the night sky like fireflies, each one a tiny beacon of hope. We had not only faced the darkness of the forest, but transformed it into a source of inspiration. As the evening wore on, we shared stories of other fears we had faced since that fateful day. Academic pressures, personal struggles, and the inevitable changes that life brings. Each story was met with support and laughter, a testament to how far we had come. When the bonfire began to wane, we gathered closer, forming a circle. "Let's make a promise," Ben said, his voice earnest, "to always face our fears, whatever form they take, and to lean on each other when the shadows seem too heavy." One by one, we agreed, sealing our promise with a smile. The forest had once been a place of terror, but it had become a sacred space, a symbol of our growth and resilience. As the night ended, I took a moment to reflect. The journey through fear had led us not only to victory, but to an understanding that light exists within each of us, ready to shine even in the darkest of times. The whispers of the forest were no longer haunting. They were stories waiting to be told, lessons waiting to be learned. We walked home together, the stars shining brightly overhead, a constellation of hope reminding us that we were never alone. Together, we had transformed fear into courage, darkness into light, and shadows into stories of resilience that would inspire others for years to come. And as I lay in bed that night, the talisman resting on my nightstand, I knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face, new fears to conquer. But with my friends by my side, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next. The forest had taught us that while shadows may linger, the light of friendship, courage, and hope would always guide us through.